Man, what a year 2022 was for video games. We had plenty of disappointments come out, but we also had a good share of quality games that we spent dozens, if not hundreds of hours on throughout the year. 2022 was different for me as I got a chance to play the most new releases in a single year than I ever have before, and by quite a wide margin. I played nearly 40 new releases in 2022, and I've narrowed down my top 10 to talk about in this video. I'll also have a ranking the rest video out sometime after this video, as well as a look forward to the video games of 2023. For now, let's reminisce on my favorite games of 2022. Number 10, Pokemon Scarlet/Violet. We got 2 Pokemon games this year, and they ended up being at the opposite ends of the spectrum for me. A lot of the issues I had in Pokemon Arceus, uninteresting world, boring story, were much better in Pokemon Violet. I actually had no intentions of playing this year, but found a decent deal on the double pack and picked it up for my son and I to play. What I love about this game is how cozy it is to play, especially in handheld mode. It's easy to find a groove of the tried and true Pokemon gameplay loop. I have mixed feelings about this open world though. On one hand, it's exciting to get a truly open world in a traditional Pokemon game. But at the same time, since the enemies' levels don't scale to your level, it makes it difficult to truly explore. It still kind of funnels you into a path it wants you to go. I'm also not sure about the Terra system yet, where you get a subtype for your Pokemon. I haven't really gotten a chance to test some of the more interesting types out yet, so the jury is still out on that for me. The performance is bad. This is nothing new for Switch owners. It's actually a rarity if a Switch game's performance isn't bad these days, which is sad. We really need some updated tech from Nintendo, and we needed it many years ago. But still, Pokemon's true nature shines through the problems and makes for a solid entry in this series. Number 9, Rune Factory 5. Rune Factory 5 was my most anticipated game of 2022, and how it's not number 1 on this list is a testament to how disappointed I was in it. On the other hand, the fact that it even cracked my top 10 despite its struggles really speaks to how much I still enjoy the Rune Factory formula, even through a lot of ugly issues. Specifically speaking to the Nintendo Switch version, the game is choppy, the textures are muddy, the coloring can be odd, and the switch back to a fully 3D style really hurt things like farming for me. I did a full review talking about all the issues, so check that out if you want to know more. But man, no other game reaches the depth of mechanics in a life sim quite like Rune Factory. If you just want to farm and do nothing else, there's plenty of stuff to do and worry about to make that alone its own game. But Marvelous doesn't stop there. They add combat, cooking, smithing, fishing, and of course, dating, marriage, and even having children. This game was way further down on my list when I started putting it together many months ago, but over time I realized how much I did enjoy playing another Rune Factory. I mean, heck, even through severe performance issues, I put in close to 60 hours. There was a PC version released on Steam that supposedly fixed a lot of the performance issues, but I haven't checked that out yet. Let's just say that I'm glad to see we'll be returning to the top-down style of Rune Factory 4 with the release of Rune Factory 3 Special in 2023. Number 8, Marvel's Midnight Suns. Marvel's Midnight Suns combines something I really like with something I don't really like, and I was extremely curious to know what the result would be. I really don't like superhero stuff. It's just never appealed to me, at least not in the Marvel form. On the other hand, the XCOM series, specifically the games made by Firaxis, are some of my most favorite games of the last 15 years. I absolutely love the strategy combat mixed with character building and permadeath, making every decision you make an important one. Even though Midnight Suns is made by the Firaxis team, this is not XCOM. I've always thought that an X-Men game in the style of XCOM would be cool, where you can create new mutants to fill out your party, including the customization and permadeath in ways that would still make sense. However, Midnight Suns has you controlling a party of superheroes that, let's be honest, they're not going to let you kill off. So Midnight Suns has no permadeath, and Midnight Suns also has no hero creation, outside of the main character, who has a set persona. This had me worried. What had me worried even more was when I started actually playing the game, and the dialogue was all super cringy. The character models are also not up to modern standards, walking animations are something out of like the first Mass Effect game. Really, this game reminds me of a game you'd see released 10 to 15 years ago. So why the heck is it in my top 10? Well, even though this may not be XCOM, the card battle gameplay is still really good. The attack animations are exciting, and the randomness of these cards makes each battle interesting. And despite that cringy dialogue the game starts off with, the writing starts to settle in and settle down about 5 hours in. It also made me care about these characters, which I never really did watching the Marvel movies. Adds some cool systems you'd expect to see in the base section of the XCOM games, and being able to customize each hero's attire, and I ended up really enjoying my time with Midnight Suns. Number 7, Star Ocean: The Divine Force. The biggest surprise of 2022 for me was Star Ocean: The Divine Force. This was a game I had no intentions of playing, but late one night I decided to give the demo a try, and the combat was so fun that I immediately ordered the game that night. When I got the game a few days later, I didn't put it down until I reached the end. In my review, I called the game an uncut gem, as there were plenty of flaws to find in my 40-hour playthrough. But the combat was just so addictive that I was able to fight through those complaints. The characters were interesting, the systems were deep, and the way the game handled exploration was wonderful. Recently, a patch came out that aimed to fix a lot of the smaller complaints that I had, so this is probably an even easier recommendation now than it was when I reviewed it a few months ago. This game made me a fan of the Star Ocean series, and I hope that we get a lot more of this in the near future, just with some more polish and tighter design. Number 6, Trails from Zero. I pondered leaving Trails from Zero off my list completely since the game was originally released back in 2010, but this is the first official North American release for the game, so in the end I felt that it was more than okay including it on the list. And yeah, it does show its age in some areas, but the writing in the Trails series is spectacular. Playing as many new games as I did this year only hammered that home. In terms of dialogue and character development, Trails from Zero was untouched from anything else I played. This game has a ton of reading, as there's no English voiceover, and as I'll talk about in my Ranking the Rest video, games that make me do a lot of reading usually make me sleepy. I don't know, there's just something about reading a ton of text on a screen that doesn't do it for me. However, if that is something a game is going to require, then the writing better be pretty damn good to keep my attention. And Trails from Zero definitely hits that. I also love the graphical style of these 2000s Trails games. It reminds me a lot of Super Mario RPG. It's super charming and still looks great. The music, while not my favorite of the series, is still that high quality you'd expect from Falcom. I also don't like the story as much as I do in the Trails of Cold Steel games, but that's like comparing Halloween to The Exorcist. They're both great for their own reasons. I've doted on the Trails series in a previous video, so check that out if you're interested in the series. Just know that these are story-heavy games that will have you going an hour or two before you see any action, but when you do get to fight, they usually let you fight for a good long while. I'm taking my time with this game, completing as much as the side content as I can, and I'll be ready for the next game in this 2-game sub-series when Trails to Azure comes out in 2023. Number 5, Vampire Survivors. I love this game so much. Vampire Survivors is such a simple premise, but there's so much depth that you'll be playing for dozens of hours. You play as a Castlevania-inspired character and walk around a map, doing your best to survive as long as you can. And when I say you walk around a map, that's it. That's pretty much the only action you have as a player in this game. Your character fires off auto attacks, and as you collect power-ups, the auto attacks become stronger and more frantic. And as you power up, the enemies become stronger and show up in greater numbers. Things get pretty crazy, and there's a good reason why this game has an epilepsy warning every time you boot up the game. I love that killing enemies sounds like you're popping Jiffy Pop at the stove. I love collecting gems with the magnet skill. I love carefully maneuvering my character so that we can survive just long enough to kill a super strong enemy that's closing in. Vampire Survivors is old school simplicity with modern day depth, which comes together to create an incredible experience, even if there's no epic story, open world, or extreme variety. This game is an absolute gem. Number 4, Atelier Sophie II. Look, I did a whole ass review on this game, so please go check that out for my detailed thoughts from when I was actually fresh off of playing it. For now, I'm going to speak on how Atelier Sophie II stuck with me since I finished it some 9 months ago. The Atelier series is very special to me. The gameplay loop of gather, synthesize, fight is such a driving force that I'm always happy to jump into another Atelier game. Initially, I was put off by this series because of the artwork on the covers. I thought the game looked too effeminate for my tastes, but now I can fully admit that that was BS. The artwork in this game is absolutely beautiful, and while I may have issue with some of the overtly sexual camera shots throwing the tone all out of whack, there's no denying that everything is drawn in stunning detail. The music in these games, especially Sophie II, is absolutely amazing, and of course always gets snubbed by Game Awards at the end of the year. While I don't think that Sophie is the best protagonist the series has ever had, my vote would probably go to Ryza at this point. I think her story with Plakta is far more interesting than that of Ryza's. I also largely prefer the turn-based combat and puzzle-like synthesis in Sophie II compared to those in Ryza. This is my favorite Atelier game I've played to this point, but I still had some issues with the game. Gust really needs to pony up and get us an English voiceover, and I think they can do a bit better when it comes to the visual fidelity of the world. But even without those things, Atelier Sophie II is an absolute joy to play, and I very much look forward to my yearly dose of Atelier when Ryza 3 comes out in just a few months. Seriously, if you haven't tried this series yet, give it a shot. If you like RPGs with crafting systems, there's a good chance that you're going to like this game. Number 3, Tactics Ogre Reborn. Tactics Ogre Reborn is a remake of a port for a game that originally came out on the Super Famicom in 1995. Tactics Ogre is regarded as one of, if not the best tactics game ever made. Originally a spin-off of the Ogre Battle series, which plays more like a strategy board game, Tactics Ogre went on to influence several strategy games. Going into this most recent release, I had never played any of the Tactics Ogre titles, and I was skeptical because I'm not the biggest fan of Final Fantasy Tactics, which was made by the same director. I know. I've already caught a lot of heat for the Final Fantasy Tactics take, but no matter how many times I play it, it just doesn't click with me. Tactics Ogre, on the other hand, would not follow suit. It wasn't long after my first battle in Tactics Ogre Reborn that I fell in love. Tactics Ogre might not be my favorite tactics RPG I've ever played, as I still prefer a game like Fire Emblem Awakening due to its support features, but the systems in Tactics Ogre blow many other tactics games out of the water, especially in Reborn. They're so approachable, yet offer a lot of depth in how you build out your army, and strategy actually matters. Imagine that. I also really love the art style, and I'm really glad they opted not to give this game the HD 2D treatment, as I feel like this game doesn't need it. Although the sprites are derived from a game that's nearly 30 years old, they still hold up very well. I know some aren't happy about the smoothing that the pixels have received, but honestly, I don't mind it. The story honestly doesn't do much for me, although having branching paths is always a welcome addition. That's honestly what's keeping it back from being higher on my list, but I like that there isn't a whole lot of dialogue to get in the way. I love that I can just boot up Tactics Ogre Reborn anytime I want to play something without having to give it my undivided attention. I can just hop into one of the dungeon areas and grind for loot and level up my character's skills and abilities. The permadeath is there, which I love, but it's super forgiving so long as you know what items to bring along. Look, I know that this kind of game isn't for everyone, but it's very much for me. I'm taking my sweet time with this game, savoring my first playthrough as much as I can, and this is a game I know I'll be playing for many years to come. I'm very happy Square Enix decided to update the game and bring it to modern consoles, even if some longtime fans aren't necessarily thrilled with some of the changes. Number 2, Triangle Strategy. My love for strategy tactics RPGs grows ever stronger year after year, and it's due in large part to masterful games like Triangle Strategy. While it's not as expansive as games like Tactics Ogre or even Fire Emblem, Triangle Strategy plays a fine game of grid-based battling while making the decisions you make feel like they have weight to them. Square Enix, publisher of the aforementioned Tactics Ogre and Final Fantasy Tactics, went for a more focused experience with this tactics RPG. You have set characters that you use, and while you can gain new characters along the way, you're really focusing on these named characters instead of recruiting customizable units. That's because there's also no permadeath, which will go a long way with newcomers to the genre. And speaking of focused, the maps are all on the smaller side, making planning out your strategy for each battle pretty tough to do at times. The HD 2D art style looks wonderful. This is really developing around the weakness of the Switch by not trying to push the system with graphics and worlds that compete with AAA games on modern consoles, but instead focusing on a beautiful art style that is actually doable on the Nintendo hybrid system. And I don't think it takes away from the serious nature of the story in Triangle Strategy either. Not only does the game present some intense tactical action, it also acts as a part political simulator. During various points in the story, you'll be forced to not just make a single choice, but rather make a choice and then convince your party members to agree with your cause. Some may be easily swayed, but others may dig their heels in and need some evidence that your choice is the right choice. Evidence you can find by exploring outside the chambers. Even then, it all comes down to a vote, and the tension as everyone makes up their mind and casts their votes always has my eyes glued to the screen. I'm most impressed with how Triangle Strategy handles those choices. Most of the time, no matter what choice you make, it will eventually funnel back into the same storyline. By this, you would think the choices don't really matter, but what Triangle Strategy does is make the experience within that funnel feel distinct. A choice might send one of your party members away for the next few battles, while the other choice might let you keep that party member but give you a more sinister task to deal with. This leads to some meaningful replay value. The music, gameplay, graphics, art direction, characters, it just all comes together as one of the best gaming packages of 2022. And number 1, Xenoblade Chronicles 3. Monolith Soft's thundering crescendo crashed upon me with all the force of a titan. I love the Xenoblade series, but I'll admit that after what I thought was a misstep with Xenoblade Chronicles 2, and with the confusing teaser trailers of Xenoblade Chronicles 3, I was more than skeptical about this final entry in the Xenoblade Chronicles series. While I did love Xenoblade Chronicles 2, there were more than a few gameplay designs that just left me scratching my head and also made me feel like I was fighting to enjoy the game. especially after Xenoblade Chronicles, which I would put proudly in my top 10 games of all time. As I dug into Xenoblade Chronicles 3, that skepticism quickly melted away. While I don't think that Xenoblade Chronicles 3 tops the first game for me, it comes very close, and that in and of itself is praise enough. But allow me to count all the ways I love, and maybe don't love, Xenoblade Chronicles 3. First off, allow me to marvel at the technical side of Xenoblade Chronicles 3. This is running on a Nintendo Switch. Does it stack up to Horizon Forbidden West or God of War in terms of graphical fidelity? Of course not. But when you look at how many games this year struggled on the Switch, doing what seemed like pretty basic stuff, to achieve this scale and scope is mind-boggling. Imagine if Monolith Soft were allowed to develop these games for the PS5 or Series X. Whatever tricks they're using to make things run relatively smoothly are working. The story, to sum it up the best that I can, tells the tale of two warring nations forced to fight forever. Kevis and Agnes must kill each other to feed their respective flame clocks, which are giant machines that use the souls of slain soldiers to keep their tribe alive. Oh, and people are only made to live for 10 years before they die, spending their entire existence training and battling for their country's flame clock. Noah, a member of the Kevis tribe, faces off against Mio from Agnes, and the two sides are forced to come together to uncover the dark secret of how and why this world operates the way that it does, and how it's connected to the previous titles in the series. That's all I want to say for now, but by the end of the story, I had tears in my eyes. The main theme of letting go and moving forward is a powerful one, and it hit me in my personal life as I've just lost my best friend, my cat Rascal, just a few weeks before I had finished this game. You may not be affected by the story the same way I was, but that's why stories in games are subjective. The way that they connect all the titles together is sometimes ham-fisted and sometimes subtle, which I feel like creates a balance that pays off for those who casually play the games and for those who dig deep into things like iconography. The combat is the best part of Xenoblade Chronicles 3, which is great because that's what you'll mainly be doing for most of the game. I've always been enamored by Xenoblade Chronicles combat, as it strikes this perfect balance of being hands-off enough to not have to devote 100% of your attention to every second of battle, but complex enough to be able to dig into the many RPG mechanics the game has to offer. And Xenoblade Chronicles 3 has some good mechanics on offer here. Firstly, you have your basic RPG stats to look at, but Xenoblade Chronicles 3 introduces a class system that allows you to play around with different party formations without having to swap party members out. Each character can equip a slew of different classes, although some are suited better to certain classes than others. Even still, the game encourages you to get every character up to snuff on every class, regardless of aptitude. But it doesn't stop there. As you explore and progress through the world, you'll find hero characters that will give you more classes to play with once you finish their quest and they've fought with your party long enough. And these hero classes are really cool, although some are only slightly different from the base classes. This system alone gives you enough content to nearly double your playtime outside of the main story. The other new mechanic I want to mention is the Ouroboros system. Certain characters are able to join forces and become a single Ouroboros during combat. These mech-looking creatures can dish out higher amounts of damage and lay down bigger buffs to your party before unleashing powerful finishing moves. My biggest gripe about what's going on here with the systems in Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is that the game encourages you to gain XP at campsites, but that makes it more difficult to level up classes, and these two systems seem to be working against each other. It seems like it's better to level up slowly, even though the game gives you the power to level up quickly, and most of our lizard brains are wanting to level up as quickly as possible because that's what we've been taught over the years. I also have a bit of an issue with the repetitive nature of how content is distributed in this game. This was also a problem I had with Persona 5, where you'd get a new lead on a corrupt individual, investigate them, go to their palace, steal their heart, rinse and repeat. In Xenoblade Chronicles 3, you show up to a new camp, destroy their flame clock, complete quests, for them to raise their affinity level towards you, rinse and repeat. Because the combat is so fun, it doesn't make it as bad as it could be, and a lot of this stuff is optional anyway, but I would have definitely appreciated some variety. But that's really it as far as my complaints go. I love this game. I love the characters and their banter, the way their relationships grow. The voice acting is great. Gondor might be my new favorite character in the entire series.
Oh, so you agree, do you?
No, it wasn't. I didn't mean.
Go die in a ditch, you turd.
I honestly didn't think this would be my game of the year when it was first announced, but here we are. I had so much fun playing Xenoblade Chronicles 3. I felt so much playing Xenoblade Chronicles 3. And while I might sound salty, I really don't understand how this game is getting buried by other games this year. Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is special. It's special now, and it'll be special 10 years from now. And I really hope that more people give it the attention it certainly deserves in the years to come. Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is my favorite game of 2022. And that does it for my top 10 of 2022. Thank you so much for sticking around till the end. Let me know what your top 10 is in the comments below. And again, remember to keep an eye out for my Ranking the Rest video, where I'll talk about some of the games that weren't on this list that maybe you were expecting to be on this list. I always love hearing the diversity of everybody's top 10 games of the year. And I'd say that mine was definitely different from a lot of other people's, for sure. Until next time, this is Lex, signing off.